How y'all doing? Can you let me know if there are any audio issues, new setup? Everything's going wrong today in terms of technical stuff, but thankfully very organized with this video. Today we're going to be talking about the Toronto Raptors trying to trade up into the 2024 NBA draft lottery. Yeah, some of you might remark at the irony of the fact that the Raptors already had a pick and they kind of lost it. Here, that should be about right. Yeah, rest in peace, the logo. Yes. Um, Jerry West is a shining example of greatness, in my opinion. Greatness as an executive, greatness as a player, greatness as a person. We'll talk about a lot of things in today's live, and um, I think Jerry West was a remarkable example of integrity in a league that sometimes lacks integrity. Um, we will talk about integrity at length. so, um, Oak Tree saying couldn't hear the intro. It was a moment of silence. So hopefully that means you heard nothing. It was supposed to be silent. Yeah. Karen Hall, Raptors Twitter /X account really hyping up IQ the last couple of days, as they should. Okay, let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So introduce this in a very succinct way. The topic of this video is moving on up. It is based on a report, um, really speculation here. You can see it. The Trailblazers, Raptors, and Cavaliers are all attempting to trade up in the draft per Kevin O'Connor NBA. KOC is pretty plugged into certain people. I mean, he's not Woj and Shams, but he wouldn't talk out of his butt. And I believe it. I believe it. If you look at how the Raptors shifted their focus and their strategy, um, midway through the season, starting to tank, you can tell that there is probably a player in this draft, probably in the top 10, top 8, that they like. This is a very fluid draft. So today we're going to talk about not only this report, we're going to talk about a few things. Number one, we are going to address the Darko elephant in the room. Okay. There was a report with a Serbian news outlet. Um, so first of all, introducing the topic and the podcast growth. We'll talk about that. Something really cool happened yesterday, and I want to shout out that because it was really interesting, especially in light of what happened today. I want to correct the record on Darko and really just kind of correct some of the points of the interview that was translated poorly, might I add, by several North American people. It's not that difficult to find a person who speaks Serbian, um, or Croatian, Slovenian, whatever. And I just think that sometimes it's a little bit irresponsible to misquote somebody because you don't speak the language and because you're relying on Google Translate, and then you're taking their words out of context to create meaning that isn't there. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a small note on good and bad people and basically the ethos of this channel and why this channel has been the way it's been, and sometimes maybe it's gone too far. We'll talk about 5 teams that would trade out of this draft and why they would trade out and maybe what they would trade and what it would take to trade up for those picks. And then we'll talk about 5 targets the Raptors want in the top 12. Actually, we'll talk about more than 5. We'll talk about 6, 7, or maybe even 8 of them. Okay, so let's cue this up and let's start by introducing the topic and the podcast growth. Okay, so first of all, something new that I started in yesterday's live stream was I started introducing e-transfer link for those people who are aware of how YouTube basically takes money off of super chats, etc., who didn't want to go through the super chat process or maybe don't know how to do the super chat process. We love super chats around here. It's really great. It sometimes spirals, all that stuff. But one of our channel members, I will shout him out appropriately tomorrow on our live stream, had the very bright idea of Amazon wish list. I had never heard of an Amazon wish list, but I put up a whole bunch of things on my Amazon wish list of things that I wanted to get for this podcast to grow. And I'm really happy to say that a couple of those things are actually coming our way tomorrow. They've already been ordered, which is really phenomenal and really touches me. You know, it's such a generous outpouring of support from this community. You love to see it. It's always been this way. I don't know what I did to deserve it, but it's really cool. There were a whole bunch of e-transfers that came in after last night's live. I was like, yo, humbled right now, right? my computer just broke. So I'm like, wow, y'all really had some great timing with this one. Last week, I think, if y'all recall, my audio interface broke. So everything's breaking right now, but it's a good chance to rebuild this the right way. Okay. For those of you who are wondering why the hell my camera looks so different, I'm using my girlfriend's not 2011 Mac. And I got to correct my lighting setup and all that stuff. So I probably look haunted right now. But nevertheless, it's a really, really nice thing that this channel has done for me. And I hope that I can continue to give back. All right. So thank you for that. Links are still in the description below and everything. But yes, I decided to say thank you in 5 different languages. So yes, thank you. And thank you to all those people who DM, nice stuff. Thank you to people who DM questions. Thank you to people who write emails. Thank you to people who like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We went from 0 subscribers to 10,400 subscribers while being one of the most polarizing, most objectionable, most outlandishly, controversial sometimes channel, and speaking the truth as we saw it. So thank you so much for subscribing and helping us grow. Okay, Darko Rajakovic. I'm not gonna go line by line, but I want to summarize some big points from his interview, which has been used to somewhat disparage, recreate, and again, there's a bit of a spiraling of things, right? I want to give an example of David Thorpe, right? David Thorpe, a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, or a year ago, whatever the hell, went on with Jay Bunkus, went on with Will Liu multiple times. He's gone on again with William Liu on his new podcast, and he went on to allude that Scotty Barnes had some work ethic issues. They just went with it. They went with it, and they continue to go with it till this day. So now Scotty Barnes works really, really hard, as he always has, and they say, "Oh, Scotty fixed his work ethic issues." They continue to double down on the lie because these people, unfortunately, are not raised right. They have a certain vested interest in making people caricatures, perhaps because they themselves are caricatures, maybe because that's the best way to market people. I do not appreciate people becoming caricatures or being made to be caricatures or being judged by their absolute worst quality or their funniest quality. And I don't appreciate that because, look, I speak from not as much experience as I should be, but I speak from the experience of watching a lot of people from Eastern Europe come here, learn the language. I know a lot of Darko Rajakovic's in my life. None as great as him, but I've known a lot. A lot of people that are close to me know this man very well. Okay. We're talking family, we're talking friends. This is a picture of him at the Toronto Serbian Film Festival. I told Brian this. I told, anyone who would listen to this when he was hired. I've never heard a contradicting report about him in my life. That's from people that know him through basketball. That's from people who know him through, community service and stuff that he's done, through coaching, through playing. I have known a lot of people throughout my life who happen to know this guy from media in Serbia. I've never heard one person say he did not give me he broke a promise, or he didn't do this right by me, or he told me a lie, or he didn't show me attention, or he was just disengaged or whatever. He's always shown attention, presence, truth, meaning. And you may have some issues schematically with what he did last year. Not perfect. Well, I myself was very critical about Dennis Schroeder stuff. But man, the way the Toronto media has presented this man, I'm going to tell you how they've presented him. They've presented him as a bit of a pariah. They've presented him as kooky or weird. They routinely jabbed fun at some of the techniques that he used to build camaraderie and trust and facilitate trust within the locker room. They mocked him and they called him a yes man. And twice now they have used an interview in Serbian and they have basically mistranslated it. So let me clarify the record. I don't speak for Darko Rajakovic, but I do want to speak for people who have had this happen to us. Having people misquote you because you can't speak the language as well as them, or because an interview is misquoted. Like I watched one of the best guys in the NBA ever, like Goran Dragic, really one of the best human beings. Find a person that's met him. If you've met him in summer league, if you've met him through the media, Goran Dragic is fucking class A. And I watched this media turn him into this pitiful person who hated Canada, and it could not be further from the truth. He does not hate Canada. He did not hate the Raptors. And I watched them just turn him. And Unfortunately, that's what happens when you mistranslate and you already have an opinion, and then you color everybody's opinion blind about a person. Now, Darko Rajakovic has been colored as this company yes man, this spineless, gutless, willless, kiss up. And, he doesn't have the toughness to do this and that. Um, oh my God. You know, like if you knew one thing about this man's life, if you understood the guts and glory that it took to become the type of person he became, and it speaks to a larger point that I want to touch on, which is about good people, and I promise we'll get to the draft report and all that stuff. But I just wanted to use this podcast as a means of communicating this because I don't know who's going to hear this, and I don't know who needs to hear this. But we need to change how we do this. Darko Rajakovic's interview um, was he talked about a lot of things in that interview. He talked about the tough season the Toronto Raptors had. He made no illusions about the fact that it was unexpected, some of the things that happened. He made also no illusions about the fact that there were some, expectations coming into the season that maybe something like this could happen, that a whole bunch of players could be traded, that certain players could get injured. But never did he imagine that it would be this volume of things. And I understand what he's talking about. Darko had one of the hardest jobs in the NBA last year. He had a rotating door of players, shifting expectations. He had a club that could not tank properly because they had given up their pick, but also had to be charged with developing players that had been, and then all over that, it was hard enough. The basketball job was hard enough. Then there's the personality element of having to reconstruct an entire culture of selfishness and this lack of trust that had occurred. And if you want to understand, who Darko Rajakovic is and what he did for the Toronto Raptors last year, look at the shot quality index. Look at the quality of shots that were generated. Look at where the Raptors ranked in terms of assists. Look at how this team communicates with each other on the court. Not once this year. Not once this year. No, I say that, not once. Rarely this year did I see finger pointing. Rarely did I see discontented body language. Rarely this year did I see, guys calling each other out in the media. And I never once saw this coach who was constantly being scrutinized by this media space. Never did I once see him bait on his players. Not once did I hear him deflect responsibility onto his assistants. He always took accountability. There's this thing about this channel where I wanted it always initially to support good people as much as I humanly possibly can, given, my limited reach. Um, I always wanted to be a voice for people who maybe didn't want to speak for themselves or maybe couldn't speak for themselves in that situation. And, whether it's Scotty Barnes or whether it's Emmanuel Quickly or whether it's RJ Barrett, or whether it's Jakob Pertl, or Masai Ujiri, or Darko Rajakovic, or a lot of the assistants like Jama, etc. I don't think I can find a character issue with a single person on this roster right now that pertains to basketball and their role within basketball. I see a lot of really, really good people here. And good people build good organizations. Good organizations, selfless organizations do not just occur randomly. It takes really good people to put the groundwork in place to build trust. And I don't think that enough credit is given to how much work the Raptors had to do to overhaul this culture of me first selfishness, to weed out not only who was responsible for it, but also to completely reestablish the trust, to have a completely new coaching staff come in with a star player in Pascal Siakam who had one foot out, to have OG Anunoby who basically, didn't know where he was going to be pending free agency. You really put Darko Rajakovic through the meat grinder last year. And I don't think that this media space really helped with that situation. And now they're taking his interview out of context. So a few things that he talks about in the interview. He talks about the Raptors losing their eighth overall pick. He talked about this draft being somewhat flat. He talked about Nikola Topic and, Jurisic, and, talked about those guys in the context of Topic being like a really good player, really good young player. He's curious to see where he's going to end up, that a lot of that will depend where he ends up. Jurisic, he talked about him being a guy who will have a long NBA career. But the one thing that a lot of people honed in on was this notion of 2, 3 years versus 5, 6 years. And that's a part of, where Google Translate kind of, I don't say they did a bad job. Google Translate's fine, but you have to understand the context which you're going in. And again, a lot of people have been looking for a story, right? Like the Raptors are tanking. That's a story. The Raptors are tanking for 2024. People don't like confusion. People don't like we'll see, you know? E-Trick saying Raptors fun, don't trust Darko. I'm assuming that means Raptors fans don't trust Darko. Why? What is it about him? What is it about him that you don't trust? Is it the genuine good guy that stands up for his teammate, that stands up for his coaching staff, that stands up, for his team, that doesn't point fingers? What is it that you don't trust about him? Uh, I'm sorry, like, and please don't, and fuck you if you say it's because he has an accent and because his name is hard to pronounce. Because honestly, like that fear of foreigners, that fear of people who are different than us, shit, it really needs to be left, 25 years ago where it belongs. And frankly, it didn't even belong there, right? I think it's just completely insane. And look, don't understand the barriers that you have to go through to get this job. I mean, you can agree or disagree with this, but I think Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are among the 5 to 6 best brain trusts in the NBA. And they found Nick Nurse, right? They promoted Nick Nurse. And Nurse has gone on to become this really, hyped head coach, and a lot of people see him as a top 5. They found this guy. Like they did. They identified him, okay? And they have identified Darko Rajakovic, and he talked about his role as a guy who, has been entrusted to develop players, but that doesn't mean that he's an idiot when it comes to basketball, right? It really doesn't. Oak Tree saying the Don Cherry effect. Absolutely, absolutely. It is the Don Cherry effect. It is the hockeyification of everything, and not to throw the NHL or hockey or this sort of puckhead culture under things, but really, I mean, he has a fantastic basketball mind. He is very young to be granted this position, and frankly, with his I think his English is fantastic. First of all, and I'm just saying this, like, there are people who've been speaking English their whole lives who probably would struggle to match his vocabulary in terms of English. But to understand where he's come from to where he's gotten, again, this is the same reason that I support Scotty Barnes, and the same reason I believe in Scotty Barnes is the same reason, right? That I support Darko Rajakovic is because I have seen the evolution of point A to point B to point C. You can't just judge a person and say, okay, well, Brad Stevens, you don't know where Brad Stevens started. Go and see Brad Stevens at 20, and then go see Brad Stevens at 35, 36, 37, and then draw a line between those 2 points in time. You have to understand where Darko Rajakovic started, where he cut his teeth, the OKC Thunder, the Memphis Grizzlies, et cetera, et cetera. You have to follow the entire trail from when he was 16. You have to understand how rare a person you have brought into this organization. And you have to understand how many people he probably beat out for this job. Like, it is insane. Okay. They trusted him to develop Scotty Barnes. They trusted him to, mend the ship. They trusted him to change the culture. And they must think that he's a very fantastic person to do that. Okay. And they are not idiots. And I'm refusing to believe that we live in a world where this fan base is so stupid that you're going to believe what comes out of William Lou's mouth or JD Bunkis's mouth or fuck even my mouth more than you're going to trust the brain trust of, a multi-time executive of the year. Like, you cannot be this. You cannot afford to walk through life being this stupid. Okay. Toronto made a great choice in Darko. I completely agree. I completely agree. I think he's a fantastic coach, and I think his coaching staff, while it could, probably use an upgrade in certain areas, kind of honing in on Pat Delaney and maybe some of the other assistants, but I think he's a fantastic person and he's a good voice for this locker room. And I think that he built a lot of trust with his team. Do I think he is going to be here for 10 years? No idea. Don't care, actually, that he's going to be here for 10 years. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I think he has a very, very long line or a very long life in the NBA. I think he brings a lot of fantastic. Look, if you've been in an organization, if you've been at work, if you've been in a company, if you've been in an office where the morale is low, where trust is low, where your boss is an asshole, you're not bringing the best of yourself to work every day. I saw the Raptors put the best foot forward. Did they get blown out a lot of times? Yes. A lot of it was scheme related. A lot of it was scheme related, focus related. But I didn't see this team turn on each other. And I think that should count for something. Okay. If you want to hone in on all the reasons he's awful, you can find 10. But guess what? Go back and watch all of those low light mixes that I made the year before he was hired and tell me a lot of the same shit that you're bitching about right now was not happening under Nick Nurse. Don't don't reinvent history. Trust me, that 41 and 41 team was not great either. Scotty Barnes was perfectly healthy throughout the entire year, pretty much for that team. Fred was pretty healthy for most of the year. Pascal was relatively healthy for most of the year. I mean, look, you have and look, could the Raptors have eked out 6 more wins if Jakob Poeltl plays, Scotty Barnes plays? Yes, absolutely. And could they have eked out, another 3 wins if they weren't tanking? Yes. And could they have eked out another 5 wins if, they played their starters instead of playing Jalen McDaniels and Grady Dick? Hell yes, they could have. They could have ran their starters into the ground. They could have played more minutes. They could have played their vets more minutes. You don't think Garrett Temple is a better player than Grady Dick last year? Of course he was, but you know what I mean? Like you that's what I'm saying. Like everyone who's saying that Steve MC saying losing should never be accepted. Okay. Darko, please. We got the wrong coach. The heck with culture. We want to win. That's the problem with Canadians. We are satisfied with mediocre. You say that's the problem with Canadians, but maybe that's the problem with you. Think about that. I don't think that's like this is stupid. I'm sorry. Like you have to. What do you do to a baby? I mean, if you have a child, what do? You throw them on a treadmill, or you teach them how to crawl before they can walk, right? And you teach them how to walk before they can run. Okay. Certain things are process based. You have to get the right process down. You cannot win a championship in a year. You every. I am winner, bro. Okay, sure. I doubt it, but I mean, if you've won in life, you don't think this way. Very few people who win in life would ever detract from the process that it takes to win. Just very unlikely. So if you think you're a winner, great. Congratulations and kudos to you. But I very much doubt that you could ever win if you don't appreciate the process that it takes to win. Um, Pretty cool guy saying we won a championship in 2019 and that was years built up. I agree. Yes, exactly. Okay, let's move on past the good guy thing. Darko Rajakovic did not say that the Raptors were planning on being bad. Okay. What he said was that they are in a process of building a championship core, that they believe that they have certain pieces in place that they want to be able to compete for championships. He is not suggesting that they are going to compete for championships in the next 2 to 3 years, but sorry, in the next year. But he is saying that we would like to be at that level within 2, 3 years as opposed to 5, 6 years. What does that actually mean? It does not mean we are tanking next year. It does not mean we're going to be bad for 2 straight years. It does not mean that we're tanking in 2026 and 2025 because we don't believe in these guys. None of that stuff was said by him. None. Okay. And Ned, if you've read it, feel free to back me up on this. But I'm assuming you speak Serbian, yeah. So again, like to me, it was like you had a whole bunch of people who kind of wanted. It's the same thing that happened with the Scotty Barnes work ethic issue, right? They had a suspicion that Scotty Barnes was immature because they don't like the way he talks, or they don't like the way he dresses, or maybe he's not cool with them. So they had it in their mind that this was the case, right? They had it in their mind that this is what's up with him. And all they needed was one person to even allude to the fact that maybe he has work ethic issues and they're off with it. That's the problem, right? It's like when you're deeply insecure that your woman is cheating on you and she comes home smelling like cologne. You don't think she walked through a mall. You don't think there was a guy with very strong cologne in the elevator. You immediately think she cheated on you because you're insecure. But you're inventing shit. You don't have proof. Cologne is not proof. And, some random person who's never met Scotty is not proof of his work ethic issues. Just like a bad Google translation is not proof that Darko Rajakovic is suggesting but then next year, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is this same stupid report that was mistranslated is going to be referenced time and time again. And if the Raptors come out winning, then people are going to call him a liar. They're going to say, oh, but he said they were going to take next year. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And the whole only point here is they want to be competing for championships in the next 2, 3 years and not in 5, 6 years. Does that make sense? Which means that they are targeting a championship window opening for them in 2 to 3 years, which could mean they want to make the playoffs next year. and they want to make the conference finals the next year. And then 2, 3 years, now maybe they're going for championships in 2027. That doesn't sound like a team that's about to tank for 2 straight years. I'm sorry. So this is um you keep acting like the Doug Smith report wasn't pushed by Messiah. Why would Doug Smith target Scotty for no reason? Because he doesn't like him. What world do you people live in? I just want to know. Like, I'm sorry, Emerald. What the fuck do you think? Like, why do you people do this? I'm sorry. The level of lunacy here that Masai Ujiri is just texting Doug Smith like, "Oh yeah, sure. Write that. No, don't write that. No, write that." Doug Smith is his own person. He has pretty carte blanche to do whatever the fuck he wants. He's been a bad reporter for 25 years, and I promise you, like, he is doing his job the best that he knows how, and it's about as bad as it's been, for 20 years, and he's on a steady decline. Okay? But why do people think that Michael Grange and Doug Smith work for just because it's under the same umbrella does not mean they have the same bosses, does not mean like what y'all have a job? Like so like, hypothetically, if I work for Amazon as a delivery driver, right? And I start talking shit about Jeff Bezos, do you know what I mean? Like, you think my boss put me up to it, or am I just an independent person with a fucking Twitter account? Like corporations are not necessarily as connected as you think they are in the way that your mind connects them. Okay, I'm sorry. Like, Doug Smith is not his mouthpiece. Now, were there issues about some things with Scotty Barnes relative to like in terms of certain players on his team maybe had issues with? Sure, yeah, yeah, and I know those stories, but what Thorpe said was he didn't work hard during the summer. What the issue was maybe was that he was doing some private stuff by himself and he didn't want to do it somewhere else. Okay. And those are two separate things. I'm sorry. Those are two separate things. Like for instance, right now, if you and I, Masai literally said Scotty needs is still growing. What do you think that means? I think it means you can't read. No offense. What? Who's not? What? Okay, okay. I'll give you a challenge. Find me a 23-year-old who isn't growing, or find me a 23-year-old whose GM thinks they're not growing. I don't know what this means. I'm sorry. And I think maybe the more I respond to you, the more I'm going to derail this video. So I'm just going to stop because I don't think that we are necessarily equipped to have a conversation. Look, my point is the Raptors are not trying to be bad for 3 straight years. Okay. No matter how much the media wants to hear it, they want to hear that. Okay. Anything Masai Ujiri says or Bobby Webster says about 2, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, is going to be misconstrued to fit the narrative that they already have in their minds. There's a confirmation bias here. You already think something and you're trying to piece things together you're not curious, you're not open, you're not trying to find out the truth. The truth is irrelevant. The truth about how hard Scotty Barnes worked in the offseason, that was irrelevant. The truth about, what Darko Rajakovic really said is irrelevant, as long as it fits your narrative, right? If it fits your narrative, good. Pretty cool guy. I disagree with you on Doug Smith. It's all clickbait, negative publications to get fans going. Bad news is good news for the old folks in the media. People are catching on to that type of news. Sure. So the longer point of this, and this is going way too long. I apologize. I'm just dragging this out forever. The longer point of this is Darko Rajakovic should not say they're going to be bad next year. I think if you want to be generous in your reading of what he said, he does not expect them to win a championship next year. Surprise. And he expects them to build around Scotty Barnes. Surprise. No new information there. And he thinks there are some pieces that they can build with going forward. Surprise. And he thinks those pieces got better this year. Surprise. And he thinks they had a really rough season and it was unexpected. And he didn't expect nearly as much shit that happened this year to happen. Surprise, because no one expected RJ Barrett's brother to die. And no one expected Jonte Porter to fucking get, in a betting scandal. You understand the kind of shit that this locker room weathered? Seriously, you have a bunch of people in the media who defended a coach who couldn't even fucking keep 2 contract extensions from derailing his entire team's focus. 2 people and 2 contract extensions. And you had infighting, you had people unfollowing each other, ghosting each other. That was what he couldn't go through. And you have another coach who's being criticized for not being as good as that previous coach, at apparently keeping guys together because he got blown out a few times, who had to deal with one of his star players losing his brother to a death, one of his key rotation players getting banned for life from the NBA, two massive injuries, three massive trades. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Unbelievable. Coloco's health issues, another one, huge. I mean, you're talking about a guy who this organization put a lot of faith into as their franchise center of the future, potentially coming up. I have no question in my mind that Jakob Pertl, bringing him back, signing him, etc., had something to do at least with Christian Coloco. Like bringing Jakob in must, in my mind, have something to do with the tutelage of Christian Coloco. The amount of work they put in with him in the summer, even while he was recovering, and to have his career just derailed like that, how much would a rim running, active center like that? We're watching Derek Lively. I mean, honestly, Christian Coloco is not quite Derek Lively, but he's that type of player. I don't think people understand how good and how big a loss he was. Jonte was, losing RJ for all that time, completely restructuring the way Scotty's playing, how much they got out of Scotty, helping Scotty become an all-star. I mean, dealing with the constant shuffling and four major trades. Sorry, it wasn't three major trades. It was the OG trade. It was the Dennis Schroeder trade. It was the Pascal trade, and then it was the trade, to get Kelly Olynyk. And I mean, every single time you get some momentum going, boom, there's a whole bunch of guys. Look at 13th overall pick that's performing like a G leaguer and is struggling in the G League. How do you keep him motivated? How do you keep him alive? And dude, I've seen a lot of really good leaders. I've seen a lot of great coaches in my life. Darko is going to be a great coach. Okay, mark my words on this. Mark my words on this. Okay, let's move on. I cannot talk about good people and Darko Rajakovic anymore and respond to any more of these comments. I really just need to move on with this. Okay, in terms of picks that can be available for as it pertains to the previous reports that the Raptors are looking to trade up, and I do believe this report. There's a lot of things that the Raptors have done that kind of align with this idea that they are interested in someone in this range. And I do want to point out that there have been several times that the Raptors have tried to move up in the draft, and usually it is for good reason. The first one that comes to mind is 2013 for Giannis Antetokounmpo. They tried to move up to 11, 12, 13, but people just fell in love with their picks. And a lot of people have compared this draft to 2013. They tried to move up in 2018, I believe, for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So that's two of the top five players in the NBA. Okay, currently, if you consider, yeah, I think it's fair to say two of the top five players in the NBA. Masai Ujiri saw both of them as what they are, and again, they developed in some very not optimal situations. I mean, the Bucks were not necessarily the greatest situation in the world for Giannis to develop in. Maybe he could have been an even better player under Dwayne Casey and the Toronto Raptors. Who knows, right? But nevertheless, those guys went into situations like Clippers, Bucks, etc., dumpster fires organizations, and they still rose, and they were great. So the problem is, couldn't make those trades. Has Masai Ujiri learned to stop doubting himself when he sees a prospect like this? So we need to talk about number one. We're going to talk about the five teams that have picks that I believe could be available and why they're available. And we talk about some of the players that the Raptors might be targeting and how much maybe they have in common with a Giannis or a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All right. So number one, the Sacramento Kings at 13. A lot of reasons why they might want to move off this pick. They're looking to be good. They weren't very good last year. The West is accelerating, getting a lot better. Way too smoky saying, I get a feeling it's Edie. I get a feeling it's not, but sure. Again, the Raptors have always done their best to help Canadian prospects. It's just good. It's just good practice. And saying some nice things, Dan Tolzman saying some nice things about Zach Edey does not give me any reason to believe that suddenly Zach Edey is the top target. Does not fit with how they want to play. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be a first round pick. I've softened my stance on that. He deserves to be a first round pick, but he's not. I don't think he's a Raptors target, and he is not going to be subject to this video. So if you're waiting for me to say Zach Edey, that's the big target, click away right now. It's not. I don't think that's it. The Sacramento Kings have some young talent. They found a really interesting young talent in Keon Ellis. They have Davion Mitchell, who probably is not going to work out. They have Keegan Murray. Could they use another one? Sure, but do they even have time to develop that player? Do they have the minutes? And can they afford to pay that player, 5 million, 4 million, whatever the cap hold is or the cap space is going to be for that? Or do they need someone who can help them now? Are they enamored with this draft? I think these are all worthwhile questions, but can you offer them something like plus something to get this 13th pick? Hell yes, you can. In my opinion, you can offer something of value, take back an undesirable contract, and move 19 plus that thing for something that they don't want, right? Um, this is true. We hear about moving up in the draft every year. Just going to assume we won't and save myself the disappointment. Two things that make this draft exceptionally likely to not be like the other drafts. And I understand where you're coming from, YouTube expert. Great name, by the way, and Albert Einstein of all things. That's awesome. I've actually used that picture in a video. So, shout outs to you for that. Um, Here's the thing. Very flat draft. A lot of people with, some credibility in draft circles saying there's not a big gap between 19 and 12, 19 and 11. I've said it myself. There's not a huge gap. So if you're a team that's not in love with a prospect who's at 11, 13, 9, 7, etc., 5, moving back a few spaces is not the end of the world. It might save you something, and actually it's probably better value. And if the guy you like is, I don't know, Kel'el Ware. Like, let's say you're really high on Kel'el Ware and, it's draft night and you get this intel that he's going to be there at 19, then why not trade back, 9 picks, 6 picks, whatever. The problem with, the Raptors in the 2 years that they tried to trade in was they didn't have a pick in 2013. I believe that was the pick they traded for Kyle Lowry. Am I not? Am I correct? I think I'm right. And also in 2018, I don't think they had a pick either. There's a lot of years where the Raptors just haven't had a pick. It's hard to go to the table and say, "Hey, we want to trade you, a future pick for now," right? Like today, this year's pick for 3 years from now pick, right? Um, Victor Chang saying, "Rob, here's an idea for another video. Which five top five 20." Okay, that's an interesting video idea. I apologize. By the way, it looks like I have one bar, so I hope there's not a huge connectivity issue, and I hope that I'm coming through okay for you guys. But I apologize. Internet connectivity going in and out right now. So I think the Sacramento Kings would be a really solid option. But what I was saying was this is a very flat draft. There are a lot of people who are super capped out. There are teams with maybe not a lot of development roster spots. 2025, 2026 are considered better drafts. And the Raptors, for the first time in a long time, have an abundance of draft picks going forward. Typically, the Raptors are almost always operating in a pick deficit because they've been giving up picks pretty much for the last 7 years, 8 years. They gave up picks for Kyle. They gave up pick for Serge. They gave up picks for Thad. They gave up picks for Jakob. Like, how many first round picks has Masai Ujiri traded away? He's traded away a lot. So for the first time in a long time, you actually have picks. Now, is 19 super valuable? It's not super valuable, no, but neither is 13, neither is 11, neither is 5. Like, none of these picks are super valuable. These are not the premium creme de la creme type picks. These have to be a diamond in the rough, beauty is in the eye of the beholder picks, where you see something in someone who's at 7, 8, 9, whatever. Because if Giannis was Giannis Antetokounmpo, Greek freak in the draft, he doesn't go to 15. He goes to number 1. If Nikola Jokic in 2014 is a future face of the league MVP guy, he's not going second round. He's going first overall. Giannis and Jokic should have gone first overall. They didn't go first overall. Somebody saw the beauty in them. Somebody saw the value. So the Raptors maybe are telling on themselves a little bit by trying to trade up aggressively in this draft. But I do believe for months now, there have been behavior that has suggested they're targeting someone in that top range. So Sacramento Kings, I think it's gettable. I presented something in my previous video about Kevin Hurt, a trade centered around Kevin Herter and Bruce Brown and a swap for 19 and 13. Helps the Kings in terms of cap relief. I think there are other teams that can also be helped out in cap relief in terms of, freeing up some spots. The Chicago Bulls are going to be a tax team if they end up paying for Patrick Williams. Can you soften the tax bill for them? Well, swapping 11 for 19 is going to free up a couple $1 million, right? And maybe taking on some extra salary and giving them back less salary because you're under the cap, you can absorb more salary and they can absorb the trade exception, can help them out. Is that worth moving back 8 spots in the draft for them? Sure. So the Toronto Raptors, I believe, really will. If they really want to, this is the draft to move up. I think, and also that 31st overall pick. Exactly. This is a great point. That 31st overall pick is, I think, the great sweetener that the Raptors usually don't have. And if they have something else, like if they want to move up even higher, like if they want to move up 3, 4, 5, whatever, I think that Indiana 2026 pick could also be something that you could start conversations with. What I'm saying is, even though you're not willing to move off of Scotty, presumably you can't move off of Manuel quickly. You're probably not moving off of RJ Barrett. Even though you're not moving off these guys, what you have right now is a boatload of draft picks. Not great draft picks, nevertheless, but still draft picks. And you have a bearish outlook on your future, right? Which helps your future draft picks. So if you wanted to trade 2028 Raptors first round pick, top 13 protected to move up in the draft this year, I'm for it. I don't care. Whatever. 2028. It's not real. I'm just kidding. I'm not for trading any more first round picks necessarily, but I'm saying if you love a player at 11 or 13, I'd be for it. So Sacramento is the first team, in my opinion, that kind of fits that bill. The second team that sort of fits that bill is the Chicago Bulls, and the Chicago Bulls are at 11. So Sacramento's at 13. The Bulls are at 11. Could you get Alex Caruso and 11 for like a whole bunch of picks? No, probably not. There's someone who will be able to outbid you. So you're not going to be able to get something and 11. But maybe you give up something, take back something bad, and move up from 19 to 11 and throw in 31. Is it worth it for you? Sure. I think OKC is potential, but I don't see Sam Presti dealing with us for some reason. San Antonio. Now, I'm basing this on the fact that the Spurs and the Raptors have a really good history of making trades. Um, there's no guarantee that the Spurs want to be super young around Victor Wembanyama. They probably believe in Jeremy Sohan. They probably believe in Devin Vassell. I don't know if they believe in Keldon Johnson, but they certainly have a building block in Victor Wembanyama. I think the question for the Spurs right now is how young do you want to be? You want to add two top 10 picks. I don't know if they have the time to develop those players. And so I'm curious if 4 or 8 are on the table, right? One of those could be on the table because the Spurs can potentially do something better with their picks. Darko Rajakovic also said something really interesting in the interview, where he kind of talked about the pros and cons of losing the pick. And, he talked about how it's really hard to develop 3, 4 rookies in the same season, right? So you start looking around at teams and you start looking around teams that have 2, 3, 4 draft picks. It's the same reason that the Raptors traded that OKC pick. If you had kept the Spurs pick and the OKC pick, now you have 4 picks in the top 31. Now, granted, you ended up losing that pick, but still, even if you'd kept the OKC pick, you're in a very, very awkward situation and everyone knows it, right? So start looking around at teams that have multiple first round picks and ask yourself, are the Knicks going to use 24 and 25? Can you trade for 24, 25 right now, right? Just trade for it right now for a couple future seconds and maybe 31, right? Trade 31 and a whole bunch of seconds and get 24 and 25. Can you use 24, 25, and 19 to move up to 7? In theory, you could, right? So what I'm saying is this isn't one of those drafts where I feel like someone is going to be like, no, I'm not trading a top 5 pick because I'm going to get a superstar. There are no superstars here. So it's different. So I think the Spurs could be an option and a really cool option because they have 4 and 8. The Memphis Grizzlies, a lot of players on that team. A lot of expensive players, 3 very, very expensive players. And Gigi Jackson was fantastic for them last year. And I think Vince Williams was fantastic for them last year. I think they have a lot of guys who are already on the come up, and adding another lottery pick to that, especially if they're not enamored with someone, may not make a lot of sense. Also, pretty small market. It's worth noting. Another team that I think fits this bill is the Detroit Pistons. Whoa, worst team in basketball, apparently. Um, Look, the Detroit Pistons were hella bad last year. They continue to be hella bad, and they will probably continue to be hella bad this year. Cade Cunningham, I have my thoughts on Cade. No one in the NBA seems to agree with me on my thoughts about Cade. I've been laughed out of every room that I've talked about Cade as not being a franchise player, but hey, we'll see who's right in 10 years. But I think I'm right on this one. Jaden Ivey hasn't been great. Monty Williams not playing him. Asar Thompson has a lot of holes in his game, and I would love him. Like if God like make a trade for Asar Thompson plus the top 5 pick, I don't know what we'd have to give up to get it, but man, that would be incredible. Nevertheless, the point is maybe with the change in ownership, it's not change in ownership, change in management going towards Trajan Langdon. Maybe this is the type of person who doesn't see the value of top 5 pick. Maybe they had Alex Sarr on their mind, Zachary Shai on their mind, and there's this idea in their minds that if one of those guys doesn't fall to 5, they're out. Again, they plan to be super bad this year. I don't think they plan on falling to number 5 2 years in a row. And once again, they fell to number 5. So, um, 705 Machine Guns saying, give up RJ to Detroit if you want a top 5 pick and more assets. I think they accept. I think you might be overestimating the value of RJ Barrett because they would have to absorb him into cap space. I don't know what their cap sheet looks like next year. And probably check that. You probably should check that. But nevertheless, I think that that is a viable option. Let's talk about some players who could be targeted in this range. And I think, we have to start out with Stephon Castle, right? I think Castle is a fantastic young player. Probably fits the mold most of that Giannis Shai type, guy, shaky jump shot, really, really great sort of young prospect. Again, guys who are 22 are not worse than guys who are 19 or 18. It's just you've seen more of it, and there's less of a chance that there's about to be some massive pop. Okay, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Um, Prospects rise and fall at different times, but the earlier you draft somebody in their career, the the more likely there is to be a surprise jump somewhere. Now, there's a lot of prospects who are going to get better. In fact, I'm willing to bet that 90% of these players are going to be better in 3 years than they are today. The question is how much better? 5% better? 2% better? 17% better? Like, what are we talking about here? With Stephon Castle, I believe he has the chance to be 3 or 4 times better by the time he hits his prime than he is today. And that is not the kind of upside I see in more than 3 or 4 players in this draft. So, given the fact that he really, really fits some of the point of attack stuff that the Toronto Raptors need, I think Stephon Castle could be that player that they're targeting. Unfortunately for them, I don't think any of these picks that I identified here that Castle would be available at any of them. Okay. I do not know why I have so much stuff on Castle tape here. Sorry. Um, did I expect to talk about him for a real long time? What the hell did I do here? Oh man. That's what happened. Okay. So what happened is I have a 720p video with a 1080 feed, and the edges got cropped. So another player that we can definitely talk about is Salon. I think that he's a little bit raw, but there is like defensive upside there, and there's definitely some parallels with the length and upside of some of the players you saw, like Giannis Antetokounmpo. There's the evolving jump shot. Does he have Giannis upside as an athlete? No. But is this the type of player that maybe you think there is that surprise pop that I was talking about coming down the line with him that maybe other people don't see? Is this a player? I mean, the Raptors have already been rumored to be, scouting him, looking at him. Is this someone where um, Nathan Taylor saying, I like Dadier more than Salon? Yep. Sure. I mean, it's pretty much a crapshoot at this point. But, there's this fit element of you traded a whole bunch of guys, Pascal Siakam, Precious Achua, OG Anunoby, and everyone keeps talking about getting some of those guys back. Is Salon one of those guys? He's Missy. Look, I love this guy, and I don't know where his draft stock is right now because I'm not really plugged in to the draft as much as probably I wish I was or should be. However, I'm curious to see, how GMs will see him as a prospect. I see him as a top 13 pick. Now, if you're trading at Sacramento, if you're trading with the Bulls, he's probably going to be there at 11 and 13, at which point you'll reach, right? But again, we talked about it before. you have to be contrarian and right. So you have to see somebody who is, worth that pick that other people didn't see. Ultimately, that's the only reason he would even be there, right? Um, so I could see East being that pick. He has a lot in common with a lot of the players that the Raptors have succeeded with before. He was late to basketball, so he has stuff in common with not only Pascal Siakam and Christian Koloko because the obvious Cameroon connections, Africa basketball, etc. But he also it has one thing in common is that he is never ever in my um, m- to my memory, he has never been explicitly linked with the Raptors, which is to say, I don't hear a lot of reports linking East Misi to the Raptors, which is usually a good omen that it's probably going to be him. You didn't hear a lot about the Raptors and Christian Koloko either. You didn't hear a lot about the Raptors and Scotty Barnes. The Raptors like to play these things close to their chest, and I mean, I think that he could be the guy that you take at 13, and maybe other teams see him as a top 17, 18, 19 guy, and you go four or five picks early, and then you just develop him. He fits a lot of the needs that the Raptors have. Then you have Zachary Richache. The botching of that French is so horrible. I promise if we actually do draft Zach Richache, who I would pick probably in top three, some people think he's going to fall. And if he does fall, he really, really fits, man. His two-way upside, his, fluidity and coordination at his size, his, defensive potential, versatility, etc. I think, long term, he could be good. Next year, he's going to struggle bad. And there's going to be a lot of people calling him a bust early. And I think that, he's going to have an adjustment period, but stay patient with him. And I really do trust, um, Five Adams saying, would you trade up RJ for Reed Shepard for RJ Barrett? In my opinion, Reed is Steve Nash with defense. I don't see any Steve Nash in Reed Shepard at all. I do like Reed though a lot, but not for the same reasons you do. I think he has a lot more in common with Fred VanVleet, to be honest. Um, so yeah, so I think Zachary Sachet is the closest thing to a prototypical first overall pick in this draft, and I'm not scared at all by his weaker second half. I buy him as a shooter, I buy him as a defender, and I buy him as a worker and a guy who just really loves the game of basketball. Like I'm very high on Zachary Sachet. I'll probably be wrong. I think he has a lot in common with Brandon Miller, to be honest with you. Last year, and Brandon Miller was a guy that I did not like very much in the draft process. So again, maybe I'm overcorrecting here, but I really like him. So yeah, so that's sort of like where I'm at with Zachary Sachet. Another player, um, if we can get through these highlights, man, how much highlights did I? Why did I have to put so many highlights? I'm talking less about these players than I have so many highlights for them. It's funny. Um, Athletically, he tested poor. Yeah, I don't really care about athletic testing too much. I got to be honest with you. I really don't. Because basketball is not done in a lab. Okay, like there are a lot of players. Um, Damn, this kid looks good. Yes. And then we have Matas Buzelis, right? Is the jump shot real? Maybe. Does he have a lot in common with Scotty Barnes? Possibly. Can you have too many of these types of players? Probably not. Positional versatility, playmaking upside, shot making talent, potentially a jump shot, long athlete, defensive. Defensively, I could see him getting better. Really smart player. Transition, I really like him. Some people have compared him to Lamar Odom. Um, I could see this guy being there at 7. I could also see this being a Raptors target, right? He really fits a lot of the boxes that the Raptors like to check with these prospects. And, the Raptors have been enamored in the past with players that fit his mold. I think you could make a case that he has some things in common, at least, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Honestly, to those of you who are talking about Zachary Sachet testing poorly, I'll tell you something. A lot of people question Shai Gilgeous-Alexander not being athletic enough for the NBA. So just so you know. Um, Stephon Castle has Butler vibes. Sure. Make this as you wish, but I've seen Jared McCain outside of Soto hanging with uh, David Flores. Probably means nothing, but very interesting that he's down here. Yeah, I've heard some stuff about certain players. I haven't included McCain on this list. Um, and here's Alex Sarr. Look, I don't think Alex Sarr is going to fall, but in theory, he fits a lot of what the Raptors would potentially be looking for in a rim running transition big. The theory of Alex Sarr fits everything the Raptors want to do. I don't think the reality of Alex Sarr is nearly as promising as the theory of him. But the theory of Alex Sarr, I'm going to keep saying the theory of Alex Sarr until you guys get sick of it, because honestly, like, I'm kind of hearing the theory of Alex Sarr presented as the reality of Alex Sarr. And the reality of Alex Sarr is I have a lot of questions. But the theory of Alex Sarr is he fits in like a glove: shooting upside, athletic upside, switchability, positional versatility, defensively, rim protection, potentially some playmaking and ball handling stuff that he can do at his size. Really fits like a glove in terms of what you would need around Scotty Barnes. You can also invert those pick and rolls. I think, like, you have the pick and pop stuff. Could he be an elevated Miles Turner? Could he be poor man's Miles Turner? I don't know. I don't know. He could also be Marvin Bagley with a little bit more wingspan. He could also be like a really, really poor man's Evan Mobley. He could also be a lot of things. I don't know why I can't shake this idea of him not being as good as people think he is. Then we get to Reed Shepherd. Like, I buy Reed a lot. I think Reed is awesome. I think his positional, like his some of his intelligence as a basketball player and his shooting upside and some of his movement shooting and self creation and his ability to just guard. Um, it's not it's not common. It's not common to be his age and to be this good at basketball. Um, he was their best freshman by far. He was better than Dillingham. He was better than DJ Wagner and he was fantastic. And we all heard about Kentucky freshmen struggling, being better as pros, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know what? This is a Kentucky freshman guard who not only was fantastic as a college player. Yeah, you can talk about the end. He struggled in the tournament, et cetera. But I think he has like point guard skills mixed with wing skills that are very interesting. They make a very interesting cocktail of a player. And I think the shooting, it's just, he fits so well with Scotty, man. He fits so beautifully with Scotty. I don't know how well he fits with RJ and um, JLA Media. He's not better than Dillingham. Um, let's agree to disagree. I think he is better than Rob Dillingham. So, I see Rob, mess up a lot, on coverages, on reads. You could talk about the shiftiness, the athleticism, the self generation a little bit more with Rob Dillingham, but I definitely think Reed Shepard's a better player. Player total. And then you have, my obvious target, Nikola Topic, and like a guy that really in my opinion, just has this fantastic size and playmaking potential, and maybe a target for the Raptors, especially given his recent injury history. And a lot of people may be feeling like, okay, this has bust written all over it. Um, I really don't like the idea of him going to certain situations in the lottery. I think there's there are a lot of European players who struggle in the NBA for various reasons. A lot of really talented EuroLeague, veterans who've come over into the NBA and really struggled for various reasons. A lot of international players who struggle for various reasons, youth and adult. It's hard to go into a wrong situation because there is a bit of xenophobia. There is a little bit of "you're not like us, we don't know you, so you sit." There is a little bit of that. It, here's the thing: like, if your teammates hate you and you're young, you probably don't play. If your coach hates you or your assistant coach doesn't like you because they think you're stupid, like, we have this notion of like people who don't understand what we say, we automatically assume they're a little bit dumb, right? We're a little bit slow. We are very, very slow to accept that people who maybe don't look like us, don't talk like us, don't have a vernacular, maybe need, if if I'm talking to somebody, it's the height of arrogance, in my opinion. If you're talking to somebody who doesn't speak the language and they say, "Excuse me, can you please speak slower?" to assume that they're stupid. Maybe they're just trying to process what you're saying. How would you do trying to speak Chinese or Serbian or Russian or whatever? You would probably struggle more than they are. I think people are very special, who choose to come, leave their homeland, leave their country, learn a new language, and in the case of guys like Luca and You're talking learning 3, 4 different languages multiple times in their lives. These are very special people, and you should not take it for granted. That being said, I think Nikola Jovic is definitely the target for the Raptors. He would be my target. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. I think his downhill attack shit is so real. I think he will find angles to attack NBA defenses. I worry about his very physical, reckless sort of way of throwing around his body, but he is a competitor to the nines. Like, he is not scared of anybody. He impacts winning in such a way that is very rare for early young players to go into Europe to play with grown men. Really, the competition that he was facing is so much better than anything the G League, um, uh, AAU, any of the metrics that you would use to judge a Rob Dillingham or Matas Buzelis or whatever. You look at what these guys are going up against. You look at what he was going up against. Honestly, he had a harder time, and he impacted winning huge for Mega. So I think, can we get him in the 19th pick? Not a chance in hell. Um, I don't think so. Spooky Ghost Rider saying, I'm Chinese and I speak with a standard Beijing dialect. I have trouble speaking dialects of Beijing's neighbors, and I was born in one of those regions. True. Yes. S. Antonio. I wonder about Topic defensively. He's already a step behind, not to mention he has very small wingspan for his size. Offensively, he'd be great, especially in transition. So Topic's wingspan has to do with droopy shoulders. I also think his height is not really it's a lot of neck. It's like kind of like Chris Bosh, right? To me, basketball starts at your shoulders, not at your neck or not at the top of your head. It doesn't help you to have a long neck in the NBA. The only element that could possibly help you having a long neck in the NBA is sight lines, and that's really all you need from a point guard. His wingspan relative to his position is fantastic. You don't have to compare him to other 6'6" players because he's already supersized for his position. I'm not worried about his wingspan at all. You know the vibes. How far do you think Topic could possibly fall? I think he could fall. I would say the highest he would go is number 2 to the Washington Wizards. They could really use him, and they showed an openness to taking a foreign player last year. So I could see him going number 2. I could also see him going as late as number 11 to the Bulls. That would be the floor. I don't necessarily think he has a chance in hell of falling to number 19. So I think if you want to trade for him, you're cutting it very, very tight at 13. You're I don't think you're safe at 11. I think if you really, really want to assure you're getting him, you probably have to trade up to number 5 because I think there are a lot of teams that could use him. And look, I know people get hyped up, but people get cold feet. He has been mocked pretty much all year as a top 3 pick. Once a guy develops the rep as a top 3 pick, it's really hard to shake it. An injury can certainly hurt a player, but he didn't have a bad season. Okay, he had a pretty good season. It was just injury, injury, injury. And if people look at his medicals and the doctors give the all clear and they say, hey, he's going to be fine by training camp or he's going to be fine by December, etc., there aren't enough talented players for me to pass up on him. I start looking at him as soon as pick 3. Honestly, I'd start looking at him as soon as pick 1. um, 2 knee injuries is very bad. Again, you'll have to trust your doctors on that. I am not a doctor and I cannot speak to that. I have not seen his medicals. I do not have any insight on that. But what I can say is that being 18 years old, one of the youngest players in this draft, there are a lot of players who've been ravaged by injuries at 16, 17, 18, and then have gone on to have perfectly healthy careers. The body recovers a lot better prior to the age of 25. And the younger you are, the less likely it is to be something that is creating irreparable damage long term. Can we get Keyshawn George with the 19th pick? Yeah, I think you can. Jamal Murray tore his ACL. He recovered and won a championship, and ACL tears can be devastating. Agreed. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of players that come back from ACL tears, and I think Topic's style of play is very predicated on physicality and quickness and stuff. So, but a lot more of it is just his handle and his craft, right? He's not a super flyer. He's not Ja Morant. He's not a high flying, above the rim athlete. He's just a guy who finds angles. He's a guy who thinks the game. He maps the game really, really well. I think he is not quite Scotty Barnes in terms of a passer, but he's pretty much the closest thing you'll have to that level of passer. Now, the jump shot is scary for some people. The defense is scary for certain people, but I trust Darko Rajakovic to develop that dude. I would, 100%. So yeah. Anyways, okay, I'm out of here. I apologize for taking so long to get to the point with this one. In terms of the pick the trade that I think is the most realistic and most gettable, I think it would be the Sacramento Kings at 13. Now, obviously, that puts you out of range for Topic, that puts you out of range for Sar, that puts you out of range for Risashe, but maybe it puts you in range for Jared McCain. Maybe it puts you in range for an Eves Misi, right? So we'll see that. Um, Again, I want to say a huge thank you to this channel for y'all for letting me vent, be myself. Really appreciate that. Um, keep supporting good people. I really mean that. Like in your life, in general, when you see people elevating people, when you see people, who are helping people in general, just try to help the helper. I think is a good life philosophy in general to have. And if you're someone who's a little bit torn on Darko or guys like Emmanuel Quickly, or I've heard so many stories about Raptors over the years, man. I have so many friends in like content creation who do like um media stuff, recording stuff, film stuff, et cetera. So all these guys, I mean, you gotta understand, like Scotty Barnes or someone like that, or Kyle Lowry or DeMar DeRozan. Like, you don't think these guys are in front of the cameras? Of course they are. You don't think the person who's holding cameras, observing, the person's behavior? Of course they are. So I hear so many stories because everyone knows I'm a Raptor nut, and I hear so many stories from people who boomed. A particular show that they were on, or maybe were in charge of the green room where they were sitting for 2 hours, maybe even talked to them, met them, etc. And, I've known trainers over the years or guys, and I hear so many stories about who these people are to wait staff, or, who they are to a videographer, who they are to a director. And I got to tell you, like, Darko is such a solid dude, and so is Scotty Barnes. Like all of these people, like the Raptors, that this team, and I wish that Canada and Toronto will support this team more. Really, I say this as a Raptor fan, but also just as a person who believes in this team that they are doing the right thing. I think so often in life we penalize people for doing the wrong thing. Sorry, we penalize people for doing the right thing. Someone tells us the truth and we yell at them because we don't like the truth, right? The Raptors did a very uncomfortable thing, but it was the right thing. They tore down a core that wasn't working. It was going to be overpriced, and they did the right thing. And Raptor fans, a lot of you have tuned out because you don't want to be part of the losing. You just want to be part of the winning. Well, sometimes the losing can be very interesting. I think the Raptors are going to lose in very interesting ways next year, and I think they'll try to compete. I don't think they're mailing it in. The point of this video was merely to express the fact that I think you have a lot of really solid people, and anytime you accumulate an abundance of such solid people, in an organization, and you put them together, front office, etc. And not that I expect, some of the media vultures and assholes who are in our space to acknowledge that or accept that or even appreciate it, because again, it takes one to know one, right? There's a reason why all these vultures. I mean, ask yourself a question. Now, I don't want to get too personal here, but I just want to say this, okay? Around this channel and around Raptors land, we have a lot of theories about what happened over the last 2 years. Some of us might be a little bit more plugged in than others, but nevertheless, the general consensus is Dennis Schroeder and Fred VanVleet were pretty bad for team chemistry. Correct? Ask yourself. Correct, or am I lying, or am I telling the truth? Let me know in the comments. Who were some of these people in the media the closest to? Ask yourself that question. The people that I'm super critical of, who were they super close to? Those two guys. It speaks to my point that birds of a feather flock together, like attracts like. If you're inherently corrupt human being, if you're a bad person, if you have malicious intentions, if your entire worldview is driven by money, you are going to gravitate disproportionately to people who share those values. If you're a person who's humble, if you're a person who's honest, you're not going to stand for that behavior. You're going to witness it and you're going to run the other way. If you're a person with good energy, if you're a person who's elevated, if you're a person who's elevating other people, if you're a person who is conscious of your mistakes and aware and acknowledging, constantly that you're making mistakes and you're operating from the heart, you're going to draw in more people like that, and you're going to repel and frankly offend and possibly piss off a lot of people who don't share you know, your God-given essence and your values. And the truth is that when there's like 20 birds that are black or 20 birds that are white and one is black, it doesn't matter that the black bird is a good bird or a bad bird. They peck it to death because it's different. When you create an environment in which certain values get pushed above other things, I want you to imagine you go into a world tomorrow where having blonde hair or blue eyes or being 6'3" or having wide shoulders is considered a terrible thing or a great thing. You know what I mean? Like, is it in itself a terrible thing or a great thing? No. Is being great at chess like the means for which we should measure all people? No. But I feel like a lot of these media people are, quite frankly, very unhappy, quite frankly, very bad people. Um, I'm not throwing specifics. I'm not releasing DMs. I'm not releasing emails, whatever. I'm trying to operate above the belt here. But I'm just saying that a lot of these people are not very nice people, in my opinion. A lot of them have done some very unethical and very shady things to some very good people in order to get to where they're at and to build a platform. And they will have an audience because ultimately, we live in a world where gossip sells and, hate sells. And, in trying to really respond to this, what I felt very sincerely was a pull to defend what was good in the freaking world. I ended up becoming a very, very much like that. When I was being so critical of Fred and Pascal and Nick Nurse and all those people, I felt myself becoming negative. I felt myself becoming drained by all of that stuff. And very often, we try to defeat something and we become the thing that we are trying to defeat. How different is what they did to Scotty versus what I did to Fred? You know what I mean? This is not good. There was a better way to handle all of that stuff that I did last year. How crazy was some of the stuff that like I witnessed them basically tear Scotty to shreds for leaving a game 3 seconds early, and they created the scandal of the century because they wanted something to write about and they needed someone to click on their stupid ass articles. But how different is that than me interpreting, something that Fred said about Scotty and then micro analyzing that? You know what I mean? When it happens to the guy you're supporting, you hate it. But when it happens to the guy you're detracting, so having that self awareness to say, okay, we were all wrong. We were all wrong to do this way. And it doesn't matter next time, if you have a toxic team leader, you can't become toxic yourself to defeat that. And I'll appreciate, I won't go into the specifics of the names and stuff, but there are certain people who are very, very plugged in to this scene who privately DM'd me when I was going a little bit too far, and they were just saying, "Calibrate, recalibrate, recalibrate. You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't go this far." And they weren't saying it to censor me; they were saying it to save me from losing my mind trying to respond to something. The caricature shit about Scotty and Darko and all these guys. I'm rooting for these guys to shut these people up because when these people are successful, I can't wait to see the switch up. And it will happen. It will happen because I am going to choose to live in the delusional fantasy of a child who believes that we still live in a world where good people win in the end. Okay. And I'm going to believe that the good people in this story end up being victorious. The people who didn't slander, the people who took the high road, the people who didn't release the DMs, the people who, didn't retaliate, the people who stayed true to themselves, the people who kept working hard, the people who didn't take the low road, that those people are the people who are going to be victorious at the end. Okay. And I'm going to choose to assume that the people who did all that other stuff, the people who sold people out, the people who leaked stuff to the media, the people who talked shit about other people, the people who invented rumors, planted stories, people who, potentially froze out teammates and disproportionately hijacked offenses to get paid, the people who put money above basketball, the people who put money over people, that those people maybe don't sleep so well. All right. Anyway, talk to y'all later. Have a great one. We need names. You will never get them. All right. Talk to you later.